So I was actually, at the time, I didn't even work for Bowers Wilkins. I was an advisor, and I was working with them on their new headphone launch of the PX. And the general manager of the headphones division, we sat down and we were planning the launch. And I remember just really pointedly asking him, saying, all right, if you could have anyone in the world wear these headphones, be wearing these headphones in a year, who would it be? And he gave me two names, and he said, David Beckham and James Bond. And I kind of had that moment of like, oh, well, that's with our budgets, I was kind of okay there, but I like a lofty challenge. So I was like, okay, those are, but it was really clear in the direction, who they wanted wearing them. Premium, cool, British.
Welcome to Client Conversations. I'm Simon Ridpath, Managing Partner of Charles Russell Speechleys, the world's leading private capital firm that focuses on the intersection between personal, private and business. Today I'm joined by one of my partners, Richard Davis, Head of Sport and a partner in our commercial team. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you.
Before we introduce today's guest, I thought we would start by getting some thoughts from you as we're recording this towards the end of 2024, a chance to sort of reflect on what you've experienced during the course of the past 12 months and what you're looking forward to in 2025.
So, easy question first up.
Well,
I think 2024 has obviously been a year of a lot of uncertainty. So we've had elections in the UK and other countries around the world, new governments, new legislative programs, which, of course, for businesses and individuals creates a planning problem when you don't know what the outlook is and the arena is going to look like in the next year or so. But it still has been a year in which we've seen a number of businesses and sectors be extremely vibrant. A lot of my work is in the sports space, and the sports space has continued to be an exceptionally growing, and the environment there, particularly on the investment side, has been something that we've seen and has been very active in. So with the private client focus we have, or the private capital, that's where a lot of the investment in the sports space is coming. So whether that's in investments in football clubs, other tournaments, for example, that's something we've worked on a number of football club transactions in the UK and investments in other sports as well. And that's a trend which we're only seeing increasing towards the end of the year as well. In the sports space as well, another trend that we're seeing is a huge uptick in the interest on the business side of women's sport. So we've seen, I think, over the last few years, the media interest and everything that's driving. We're now seeing that translating into sponsorship deals in women's sport. The valuations are increasing, and also on the investment side, a lot of opportunities there. So whether that's new events, tournaments, teams, etc. So there's a lot of excitement in that space. Technology, I think, we can't talk about 2024 without focusing AI technology. Again, that's something which many businesses are grappling with, whether that's the excitement of what the tech changes and new tools can mean for their businesses and how they do business, but also some of the challenges there. So the regulations which are coming in the UK and the EU, trying to get hold of what that means and what that requires everyone to do. And that's something which I think across other sectors we're seeing as well. So new laws in the UK around consumer laws changing, which will be coming in the next few years. So any of us that have a subscription to Amazon or Netflix will see a number of changes to the way that they communicate with us, and that's something which a lot of businesses will have to get hold of. So I think there's been a lot of challenges over the last 12 months, but also a lot of opportunity. And as we go into 2025, I'd say cautiously optimistic is probably the outlook.
And the uncertainty being more uncertainty.
I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So now the opportunity to introduce today's guest. Our guest today is the talented marketeer, Giles Pocock. Giles is a seasoned marketing and brand executive with over 2 decades of experience, and who's worked with some of the world's leading brands and businesses, both on the client and agency side. Giles is the VP of Brand Marketing for the award-winning audio company Bowers Wilkins, one of the world's most respected premium audio brands, where he's responsible for all brand and marketing content. He's led an exciting career in marketing, previously heading up the global entertainment and lifestyle sponsorship teams at Nokia, and helped to create Sony Music's brand partnerships team. Bowers Wilkins is a renowned British company that produces consumer and professional loudspeakers and headphones. And the brand's reputation for excellence is underscored by a series of strategic partnerships and alliances, such as their partnerships with automotive and airline businesses, including McLaren, Aston Martin, and Emirates. It's also personified by the partnership that's spanned for more than 4 decades with Abbey Road Studios, and it remains to this day the supplier of choice of speakers and audio equipment for the studios. Partnerships is going to be a theme that we're going to return to, hopefully, over the course of today's discussion, and hopefully Giles will be able to explain to us why they're strategically important, why they're used by so many businesses, and what's the special ingredient that makes them work. So Giles, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I guess the first thing to ask of a guest is, what have we missed out in that intro?
I don't know. That was sounded pretty good to me.
Yeah?
It's good when you hear it all back. Yeah. 2 decades. You realise you can cram a lot in within that time.
Yes.
And I feel like those 2 decades, almost all built up to, I guess, taking over the brand and marketing at Bowers Wilkins. All the experiences I've had, the places I've worked, across music and technology, just felt like a really natural home. So yeah, it's a privilege to be looking after the brand. I consider myself a custodian rather than actually leading it. It's quite a topical conversation with the likes of Jaguar at the moment.
Right.
But I very much view it as being a custodian and trying to almost get the brand ready for the future without kind of killing any sacred cows of the past. So it's quite a fine line when you've got such a heritage brand, but it's really good fun. Yeah. And thank you for having me, and it's lovely to be here also, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so I suppose we want to touch on your career. I think we'll touch on some of the very exciting partnerships and work you've been doing with Bowers Wilkins. But in terms of your own career development, how did it start for you, and how did you get into marketing?
I've wrestled with that question. I was that classic teenage boy who was absolutely rudderless, had no idea what I wanted to do. But I remember
Is there any other kind of teenage boy?
Well, I'm glad you say that. But I do remember being at quite a young age, and I think I was quite emotionally intelligent, and I made a tacit agreement that I may not know what I wanted to do, but whatever I did, I'd throw myself into it. And I knew that, opportunities would then appear. And I think that's kind of the path my career has taken. But it really started out at university when I did a gap year at an agency. And it could have gone, there was a sliding doors moment. It could have gone a very different way. There was a moment where I was moving home to work on the QuickSave Summerfield merger.
Okay.
Just in a small town just outside of Bristol, when a friend of mine, we looked up at the careers advice wall. He said, there's an agency in London there. And I was like, what's an agency? What does that do? And he was like, no, this is a whole different thing. So there were 2 jobs. We both applied. We both got the job. So the 2 of us moved down to London, got a little apartment just outside of, somehow outside of Hampstead Heath, and then started working at this agency just off Baker Street. And it was just amazing. And I got, I learned the client side about, the initial creativity, advertising, the whole brand thing. And from there, I pretty much just got hooked. And I went back to university and then chose more marketing modules within that. And that was that put me on the path of, brand marketing.
You knew what you wanted to do.
I knew what I wanted to do, yeah.
You've talked a little bit about the importance of the heritage brand at Bowers Wilkins. Tell us a little bit more about the philosophy behind Bowers Wilkins and what does it stand for, and how do you then fit around that in terms of brand management and
what I mean by custodian, because I think a lot of the heritage brands like this come back to a founder and a founding philosophy, and the name's on the door, right? John Bowers was the audio engineer that founded the company, and I'd say his philosophy is probably the thing that still drives the company to this day. Not just the product, but also I think the marketing, and what sits above both of those is the brand philosophy, which kind of unifies everything. And I think all the great brands have that. Going back to the Jaguar piece, of saying, did they maybe necessarily
forget some
too
of that?
far? Well, time will tell. But the philosophy is basically based around the story of, true story of John Bowers went to a classical concert, came back, tried to listen back, and just couldn't get anywhere near the audio reproduction. Vowed then he would try and make as close as he could get to the perfect loudspeaker that would give the best representation of that piece of music that he was listening to, whether it be a piece of studio music or a piece of live music. And he strongly felt that you shouldn't hear the speaker, you should only hear the performance, which is where the brand line, as the artist intended, was there. And that essentially informs everything we do. Every time the engineers start a project, they start with, how do we get as close to the artist's intention as possible? You hear some speaker brands talk about they've added their color or bass or their sonic signature, and we try and do the exact opposite, which is you shouldn't even know the speakers in the room. You should feel like you're in the room with the artist. And it actually forces some difficult decisions, right? Because sometimes we always say, for instance, we're never first to market, but we're always best. And really good examples are wireless and noise cancelling headphones, which we were late to market on because the engineers refused to do wireless and noise cancelling headphones if they would interfere with the music. So it can hit you in the short term. It's not the easy decision. It hits you short term financially, but long term, I believe it's the essence of the reputation of the company, and it's all driven by John Bowers' original philosophy. So
it's a true North Star.
It's a true North Star, which really helps as a brand marketer, though, right? In terms of, what a great story to be able to tell, at things like this, or when someone says, why should we choose your headphones? You go, well, and you can go back to that North Star, and then people go, totally get it.
Yeah.
And as a marketer, how, coming from a company where the engineering is clearly such a huge part of what the brand is about, but how do you then marry the brand story versus the product? So does the product sell itself, or is your job creating that narrative around what the product is and getting that to the message out there?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, it's a privilege marketing genuinely world-class products, and they genuinely are. And you walk around the engineering facility and they're world-class engineers, and they genuine, like, this philosophy I just said isn't just a brand thing on a chart. Like, it is lived every day. Like, I pull my hair out these engineers continuously because that we're late and it's never on budget, but we have this saying that there's warehouses all over the world full of product that was on time and was on budget. Right? So it can be infuriating, but at the same time I know deep down that it's the essence of I'm going to have the best products in the world to go out, and what's even better is that I also know that I think it's a real partnership. I then know that I'm then responsible for going out and telling the brand story and I guess living up to the products when we go out and market it. And I think we do that. And I think the biggest challenge we've had is going from, I guess, what was quite a niche specialist hi-fi brand, very, very well respected, but to a very small number of people. How do you take that to a bigger audience while still keeping the values, still keeping the sentiment? And that's no easy thing. It looks easy, and I think we've done it, but that was a challenge. Yeah. Brilliant brand, brilliant products, but how do you take it to more people without alienating the people that were there originally? And I like to say, Bowers and Wilkins, I don't say we have customers, we have fans. And there's only this, I find there's two kinds of people in the world, right? There's those that have never heard of us, which there's still too many of, but that's my job. And those that know us and who absolutely love the brand and are fans. I've never met anyone who's kind of just shrugged their shoulders and gone, yeah, I know them. It's either like, I've not heard of them, or like, oh my God, they're amazing. And so that, I think, is the true power of brand and product working together.
He's trying to bring bespoke to the mass market, which is a real challenge, unique challenge.
Yeah, and if you go too far too quickly, you become mass, and then you kind of lose the magic. But there's obviously commercial pressures coming from you from the business to lower the price, go into more retailers, go into, and you have to, there's a balance there. So it's always a healthy tension, should we say?
Yeah. And in terms of the design and products, I mean, there's obviously challenges around, we're not listening to as much live music. You're listening to a lot of streamed music, which is obviously low fidelity. Is that something which the engineers really sort of struggle to marry, or is that where your sort of secret sauce is?
No, we're look, there's one thing we're not. I think there's a lot of historically, hi-fi stores were quite snobby and they were difficult. It was very specialist, and people were scared to go in and ask questions, and there was probably some level of arrogance in there, and I think it's more because it was almost a cult thing, right? And you had to know a huge amount of things about it. But at Bowers and Wilkins, we try not to have any of that. Our goal is to just make music, movies, whatever it is you're listening to, sound better. So we know most people in the world will be listening to Spotify or will be listening to Apple Music, and your music will sound better on our products. If you're listening to Spotify, Apple Music, I guarantee our products will make your music sound better, and you go, yep, I get it, I can hear the difference. But if you're spending $50,000 on a pair of loudspeakers, which you can do with us, then at that point we'd say, if you've got a Ferrari, maybe sometimes you should take it to the track. You need that higher level, because you really do get out what you put in, right? So if you put low quality in, you won't get the full experience of the product. But I've genuinely had people in the listening rooms in our visitor center and at the factory who have gone in saying they just not believing that they'd hear the difference. Can you really hear the difference? I've had people walk out crying. I've had people walk out offering us money there and then to buy the speakers. Like when you actually get the experience of hearing it, it's like hearing for the first time. And you hear elements of your favorite artists or tracks which you've never potentially heard before. I remember going in and listening to Heroes by David Bowie and picking out 7 instruments that I don't think I'd ever heard before. So it's that's the difference.
Yeah. So we'd love to talk to you a little bit about the partnerships, because you've explained the nature of the brand, its true North Star in terms of that quality and not compromising on quality, aligning that in terms of market opportunity and partnerships you've been involved in. You recently announced David Beckham as a brand ambassador. How does a partnership like that come about? How do you make that happen?
That's a really good story, actually. It's an interesting one. So that goes back probably about 10 years or longer. So I was actually, at the time, I didn't even work for Bowers Wilkins. I was an advisor, and I was working with them on their new headphone launch of the PX. And the general manager of the headphones division, we sat down and we were planning the launch. And I remember just really pointedly asking him, saying, all right, if you could have anyone in the world wear these headphones, be wearing these headphones in a year, who would it be? And he gave me 2 names, and he said, David Beckham and James Bond. And I kind of had that moment of like, oh, well, that's with our budgets, I was kind of okay there, but I was like, I like a lofty challenge. So I was like, okay, those are, but it was really clear in the direction, who they wanted wearing them, premium, cool, British. Yeah. So I remember thinking, okay, well, maybe one day. But then about 6 months later, after they'd launched, someone sent an email of a picture to me of David Beckham getting off a flight from LAX. He was playing for Galaxy at the time in London, wearing the headphones. And I remember at that point thinking, okay, this is meant to be one day. Well, one day, I know, because partnerships, we'll probably get into it, but the authentic piece is so important to me. The credibility, authenticity, it's the brand fit, but also I would never work with someone who I had to pay to wear the headphones or pay to use. They need to already love the product and be a fan, because everything else falls into place from there. So knowing he was already a fan, and then going back to us trying to move away from being a niche specialist, high-end, hi-fi brand to the most desired premium audio brand. We needed partners and vehicles to help us do that. We didn't pick David necessarily because he was in sports. We picked him because he's a global British icon. He's an entrepreneur. The style piece. And by the way, a lot of people don't realize how much music means to him. His career, he's married to a pop star. His son's a musician. So all of those things, we added all up, and knowing he was a brand fan. And it was funny. We had the conversation, and he was on the list. And then serendipitously, we got an email from his team saying, have you ever thought about, an audio partnership? And we were like, well, there you go. And the rest, as they say, was history. All we needed then was a good lawyer to help us do the deal.
Right. Well, wonder where that could have come in, but I mean, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and in terms of timeline, so you said it's sort of 10 years from the initial idea, but once you're talking with his team, how long then does it take to actually, until you see that launch event or you see the ads and you actually see on your social media feed it come to life? What's the sort of timeline there?
This one was fast and aggressive, but even that was 6 months from the initial conversation. These things, I've had some that have taken years, but this one from initial outreach, conversation, doing the deal, creating the shoot, doing the content, launching the campaign was kind of, and all the contract and legal stuff was about end to end 6 months, which I wouldn't advise anyone trying to do if they can help it. But we managed to get it done. Yeah.
And how important is it for you when you go into a partnership like that to set expectations in terms of what success looks like for you. So obviously one success was he was one of the target names on the list given to you. So you've made a dream come true already in terms of establishing that partnership. But do you set expectations in terms of heightened awareness or number of hits on social media? How do you measure success of a partnership like that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely go in, you have to set some, I think you need to set some parameters, but you definitely also need to leave, if you're too inflexible, you can then also miss good opportunities as they come. And also I always say that the first year is always a good level setter, right? Because you're only just building the relationship, you're getting into your groove. It took us a while to work out what works on our channels and what works on his channels in terms of content, and it's actually quite different for the different audiences. So, but we set frameworks and KPIs. The other big one for me though, and we track it all, wasn't just reach and awareness, it was the sentiment scores. So again, knowing that we've got old school hi-fi fans, how are they going to react to David Beckham? And some people made some comments, but overall it was really positive. And I think that's where it comes back to, if you've got a credible and authentic story and you can prove that there's a brand fit, then that argument is a lot easier to have. But overall, his social channels are over 150 million globally, and he's big in amazingly every single region. But what surprised me most is he's actually carried a lot of younger fans with kind of older ones as well. The older ones being my age, and younger ones being the target generations that we want to bring into Bowers as lifetime fans as well. So, but yeah, so it's important to have the rigor there from a KPI framework, but also the flexibility to know that you may need to pivot and zig and zag as you go to try and get the best results.
Well, I guess sticking with the theme of enduring icons over the decade, you mentioned James Bond, so that's another collaboration that the brand was involved in. So can you tell us a little bit about that one? Yeah.
Like I say, that was we haven't actually got them on the actor James Bond yet, but we did become official partner of Bond and 007 for their 60th anniversary. And again, that was, so I'm taking it as, I've ticked them both off the list. But
I was going to say, that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, that was, it was, I've always wanted to work with that franchise. I've always been a huge fan. And with Bowers, going back to why we do these partnerships, and one, there's an element of wanting to reach new audiences at scale, but there's a positioning thing as well. Yeah. But trying to generate that brand love. And I don't think there's many more loved franchises, but from a brand values perspective, obviously there's the Britishness thing, there's the style, there's performance, there's the gadget, so all of that lined up. But even then, that wouldn't have been enough. The thing for us that really made it go the extra mile was the music of Bond, and the fact that a lot of the movie scores and soundtracks have actually been recorded at Abbey Road Studios, and even more, some of the more recent ones were actually not just recorded there, but were actually recorded, mixed, mastered, and engineered on our loudspeakers. So we felt we had an authentic story to tell of actually being part of the fabric of the Bond franchise, the music of Bond. So we went in on that angle. So rather than just, slapping logos everywhere, we tried to do it from the angle of the importance of the music and how the music of Bond has actually played a really important role of the franchise. So yeah, it's been, that was a lot of fun. And I think it was a statement of intent as well from the brand of being able to actually, call ourselves a partner of Bond. We were keeping good company with the likes of, Aston Martin, Bollinger, Omega. And then obviously during that period as well, amazingly, we became a partner of Aston Martin as well. So
I was going to say, when you think back to it in terms of a franchise, there are certain things that are iconic with Bond, even before films came about, product placement and series and the likes. But you would go back to Aston Martin, Bollinger, music, theme tunes, and actually it's sort of the pioneer in that context, and to have that association fits so well with everything that you've talked about already.
Yeah, it really was, in all those things,
And I guess the alignment with Abbey Road Studios in particular, that's as Simon mentioned in the intro, it's a partnership going back over 4 decades, and in terms of sort of brand collaborations, there's very few that have that sort of longevity, and it's the magic to that, the product and the quality of what you offer, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, and I think it goes even deeper now. So 45 years next year. So story is John Bowers knew an engineer at Abbey Road Studios, and he took the new loudspeaker, as it was at the time, I think it was the 801 Nautilus, down to Abbey Road Studios and kind of dropped them off. The engineer was like, oh, what are you doing with those? And he was like, I'm just going to leave these here. And he was like, John, and he was like, just give them a week. Anyway, a week went by, and the guy said, we called him up and said, we're going to keep them another week. And then another week went by, and he said, we're going to keep them another week. And then a call came basically saying, you can leave them here. And then that was it. They've been there ever since. And so we're now in studios 1, 2, and 3. So we genuinely get to say a lot of the world's music is actually first heard on our loudspeakers. Yeah. And that also, in terms of as the artist intended, if the music is made on them, we can, I think that's another really credible way of saying that's why, when you listen back to it, you should hopefully use the company where, that's where a lot of the music's made on. So it's not the biggest partnership from the terms of, it's relatively small and niche, but in terms of the credibility, in terms of the fact that I think it goes beyond a partnership now, we are a part of the fabric of Abbey Road Studios. We're part of the DNA. When people go there, they know what Studio 1 sounds like or Studio 2. And, if you swap the speakers out, it would have a whole different sonic signature in there. And I think a lot of people go in, they want the familiarity of when they're going into the studios, and we are part of that. So yeah, it's been, and it's, we love them, and we love the team, and we love working with them. So yeah, long may it continue.
So if Abbey Road predated your arrival with Bowers and Wilkins, obviously Bond and David Beckham have been on your watch and part of your creative plan for how the brand is taken forward. Are there more collaborations planned? Do you see that as an intrinsic part of how Bowers and Wilkins will continue to develop its market share?
Yeah, I mean, Abbey Road predated it from the perspective of the products were in the studios, but we weren't actually always the official partner. So that's something we've made a conscious effort, one, to actually sign up as the official loudspeaker and headphone partner, but more importantly, to tell more stories around that, because amazingly, we weren't really telling any of the stories. So that's one. Yeah, Bond, hugely important again. And I think there's a limit to, you can't have too many, but we're always on the lookout for, are there other partners out there who share our values and can help us reach an audience in an authentic way? And I kind of have this approach, I call it the 3 R's, which is like reach, relevance, and resonance. So reach isn't necessarily the size of the audience you're reaching, it's are you reaching the right audience? Because that's really important. And some, they're really small audiences, but they over-index in terms of importance. So for instance, Abbey Road is a really good example of that, because it's musicians and producers who are in there who are obviously massively influential in music. So them seeing our products every day and working on the products, that's huge. And so we count a lot of artists and producers as fans of the brand. So that's a really good example. The relevance thing is the brand relevance thing, because if you don't tick that box, then you shouldn't go anywhere near it. The final one is what I think most brands miss, which is the resonance piece, which is, what are you actually doing with it, and are you actually adding any value? Because if you may have the reach, and you may have the relevance, but if you're just badging something and you're not actually offering anything of tangible value, then I'd also question, is it a true partnership, or has this become more of a sponsorship? So we always try and make sure we've ticked that final box, which is we're bringing something to the party that adds value, and hopefully that the partner does to us as well, the other way. So those are the truths I live up to. So and there may be a few in the pipeline which I'm unable to talk about here, but watch this space in the next few years.
People keep an eye.
Yeah, and I think that sort of authenticity, as you say, of when you see the partners and the brands that you're dealing with, and they make sense. And I think I often get a lot of sponsorship deals across my desk where you're scratching your head and wondering what the true relationship is and how that's going to play out. But if you start from the position of finding the right partners and that can tell the story that you want to tell, then that's probably the most powerful thing you can do. And the partnership, as you say, it's more than just you and your brand. It's actually combining the value of, say, an Aston Martin and a Bowers and Wilkins is going to be more impactful than just one of those brands standing alone.
Completely, yeah. And we say no a lot more than we say yes. I think that's also. But what do we bring? So I think it's important to look at it the other way around, because most of the partners we work with are much bigger than us, have bigger brands. But I think what we bring is, they may bring the scale, but the authenticity and credibility, so for a partner, for instance, for an Aston Martin or a McLaren to be able to say to their customers, we've literally got the speakers, the engineers who make the speakers in Abbey Road Studios, that's the ones you've got in your car. That's what we bring. So, which is why, going back to the brand philosophy thing, that you have to stick to that so rigidly, because that's the bit that gives us the credibility to go and talk to these huge partners and kind of sit at the table with them and kind of feel like we have a place there.
It's adding to their quality.
Yeah. Well, it's a story for them to go, I'll tell you why they're in there, because they're the best speaker brand in the world. And that's, we can back that up. That's the key. Yeah.
And I suppose over the 20 years of career in marketing, you must have seen some ones that haven't worked as well and at the agency side, but these sound like they're great fun to work on as well.
Yeah, I think they're rewarding. I mean, and, I always say we choose, it's the brands, but it's also the people and the teams as well. That it is an important decision making for us, because I don't like to enter short-term partnerships. So if it's a long-term, if you're entering a 3 to 5 year deal, you also want to know that the people opposite you on the other side of the table, it feels like a partnership and a collaboration, and it doesn't. I always say if you have to open the drawer and go back to the contract, you've probably failed somewhere along the line. You don't want that to be the case. No. It's there for up front, and everyone knows, it's a really important part of it, but you want the relationship to kind of, build from there, and you don't want it to become about the deliverables. You want it to become about, okay, growth, future growth, where do we go? And that is really important, that the person opposite you feels the same way.
Yeah, powerful. Moving on from Bowers Wilkins and talking a little bit more about other parts of your career and perhaps some nuggets of what you've learned along the way that you're putting into practice now. Who did you speak to for advice? Was there a particular mentor or someone you felt you learnt elements from that you keep with you today?
Yeah. He actually passed away about a year ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Sorry, getting emotional.
No.
He probably the one that changed my life the most. I was at Nokia, and it was an amazing time. I was 26, 27, and it was a very Scandinavian flat organization, and I was flying around the world, walking into movie studio boardrooms, and presidents of film divisions were walking out, and they'd see me, and you could see in their head they were like, is the boss coming? Or and you would kind of go like, it's me. And part of the enabler for that was he ran our entertainment marketing agency. His name was Ruben Igielko Helik. Amazing name. He was escaped. His mother escaped from the Cuban crisis and came to Switzerland, and him and his partner set up probably one of the first entertainment marketing agencies, and they were the guys that put the Nokia flip phone into the Matrix. I mean, they kind of invented, in a way, like modern product placement. Yeah. And he was the agency, and I always remember when Nokia, was in a difficult time, and I was saying to him, I think it might be time for a change. And he said, why don't you come and work for me? And so I left Nokia and then went and spent 4 amazing years working that agency. But he was just, such a huge character. But like I say, he gave me access to, probably an unenviable black book of contacts in the entertainment industry across music, film, gaming, TV. And I feel like that gave me probably a really different facet in my career, where it had been more classic brand marketing and partnerships up to that point. We got to work with, we ran BMW's global entertainment program for a number of years. We ran Nokia. So it was, and it was my first real taste of agency life as well. So he was probably the most influential. Yeah.
And he trusted you with big opportunities that you then took.
Yeah. And, it was a small agency, which was also great, which I came from Nokia, which probably had 80,000 employees at the time, to a company of about 120, so which were based in LA, London, Switzerland, based all around the world. We were all fluid, and we traveled, and and we had huge influence over these massive global brands. So that was a
pretty cool
time. Yeah. And also, taught me that I think that's where my career, I've always gone, I'm back in a corporate job now, but I think what sets me apart is I still have that small agency entrepreneurial streak, which doesn't always please the board or doesn't always. But I think that's really important, not to just go, we're not just going to do the same cookie cutter thing. We're going to push the boundaries. We're going to try and break the mold a little bit. Yeah, innovate. Yeah.
And is there one particular highlight you would pick out from any point in your career as to something, whether that's a particular partnership deal or it just maybe one of those rooms you walked into which really stands out?
A specific moment. I can tell you exactly what it was, because I remember actually sitting back and thinking to myself, oh, how do you top that? And that was I guess the denouement, shall we say, of the Bond and Abbey Road partnership, where you might have been there actually. We hired the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra to come and play in Studio One, where a lot of the scores were recorded, to play the music of Bond to a crowd of a really small audience. And we left a little Easter egg in there as well, which is we'd left some seats in the orchestra empty, so people got to go and sit in the orchestra and hear the Royal Philharmonic play these tracks and
around them.
And I remember there was actually a lucky bit. So we had people moving around the studio, and we brought people in groups, and we planned everything to the last detail. Apart from one thing, and lucky I was in the room, and we'd all sat down, and I forgot that after the second track someone was supposed to tell the audience that they could go and sit in the orchestra. And I was sat there waiting for someone to say it, and then quickly realized that we hadn't actually given that brief. So I quickly bounced up and then got to see everyone's faces as they did it, but then realized I had to stay in for every performance, and there were 8 performances, so I got to see the wonder of people's faces. They went in. I got people coming over to me afterwards saying this is the best thing they've ever done. And I remember that moment of, all right, how do you top that? Well, I'll answer that by next year. 2026 is Bowers Wilkins' 60th anniversary, and we're already planning the next one then. And if all goes to plan, that will top it, but I have to wait a couple of years for that.
Well, that's certainly something to anticipate, I think, because to have that kind of impact on people's lives is a really really
people
special
still come up to me now at events and say, oh, I still remember that being in that room. So you've done something when you've got and I'm talking senior studio executives and stuff coming and saying that to you. So.
And it must be quite a unique experience, even for someone in your position who's worked with some amazing brands. But actually to see the direct impact of a combination of a piece of work you've pulled together, the brand that you represent, and that blend of experience impacting people's lives must still be quite a rare thing. I mean, obviously you've mentioned it as the highlight, but...
Yeah, no, it literally is the pinnacle of all those things coming together. Because, what they did after they left Studio One is they went into the control room and got to hear the performance back on the speakers, just as the icing on. And so it wasn't just like we hired somewhere and put on a thing. It was like we then recorded the track and took them through. There was the fabric of the brand was woven through the whole thing. They got to understand our role within it. They got to understand that we're a often a hidden cog in this really important machine. So it was that is probably a single highlight, and mainly because, like I say, I literally had that moment of thinking like, okay, how do you top that one, Giles?
Yeah.
Well, that's your job in a couple of years' time then. And I suppose looking at the other side of the spectrum, are there any particular challenges that you've faced in your career that you sort of draw on, and what those were and what that taught you?
Yeah, you know what, I've been through some industries that have had highs and lows. The music industry, when it went from we couldn't make enough CDs and DVDs to suddenly the digital coming and the bottom falling out of those markets. But I'd probably say, and that was tough and a lot of people losing jobs. But I'd probably say I joined Nokia when it was the 5th biggest brand in the world, and we had a 2-3 years of 40 to 45% market share, making huge amounts of money. The people loved the brand, to literally being there when it went into free fall. And I was in a lot of those meeting rooms listening to people, and probably the learning from it was, I remember challenging a few, for instance, just before the iPhone came out, and challenging a very senior person in the company, saying, putting my hand up, meekly saying, but, we've done this presentation, we've not mentioned the iPhone a single time. And he looked at me and he said, his exact words were, it's one thing to put an MP3 player on a phone, which is what we'd done. But he was like, it's another thing to put 20 years of mobile phone technology into an MP3 player. Apple won't be an issue. And I remember kind of, again, raising my hand and saying, well, everything else they've done would kind of prove otherwise. And I kind of got asked to like be quiet or leave the room. I remember thinking, okay, he's way more senior. He's wearing a sharp suit. He's probably more intelligent than I am. So we'll just go along with it. And there were more and more of those examples of we went on. And I think by the end of it, I started to realize that actually these people aren't any more intelligent necessarily. And don't doubt yourself. And actually, sometimes even hide behind their confidence, right? Just a big title and a big salary. So, but it was really difficult to watch. It was one of my favorite times of my career, an amazing brand just go into this free fall, really from poor leadership and, not seeing the opportunities when they came. But I say poor leadership. A lot of it was just, the pace of change at the time of technology, which is kind of happening again now with the likes of AI, right? Which seems like the next disruptive force that's coming. And businesses that could be really solid one day, just may not exist the next. So
inertia is the biggest challenge, isn't it? Absolutely,
it really is.
Yeah. And then when you mentioned being a custodian of the brand, and I imagine that, Simon, that's something you feel very keenly with our heritage and history.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of what Giles has said really resonates in many businesses, and for many clients that we act for, it's very much that sense of how do you stay relevant. And how do you make sure that you, particularly long-standing businesses and entities, how do you make sure that you leave that entity in a better shape than you found it?
Yeah, and it's difficult because you can stay for too long resting on your laurels or overprotecting it. You do have to modernize and you do have to move forward, and that will cause some friction. I just think you have to do it in a thoughtful way, whilst keeping certain elements of the brand. Whilst maybe moving things on, and technology is going to be definitely one of those.
Evolution rather than revolution. Yeah. Pick your brains for future generations. And obviously you're still a young man, so there's still plenty to come. But do you have any advice for people coming into the industry, wanting to work in brand and marketing? Where do they start now? What's different in terms of the experience you went through for people coming into business now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's so different now, mainly because, when I was starting, the internet was a new thing. Yeah. Mobile phones were relatively new. So you say a young man, I'm showing my age now. Now the performance marketing, the data side of it is so much more prevalent. And where I actually think there's a pendulum, and I think the pendulum swung too far, and everyone starts with the data and they start with that, and especially CEOs and CFOs, and they kind of forget the creative piece and the brand piece all too easily. So to someone starting out, it is very different, but I'd say, try and surround yourself with good people, build a good network. I'd say on your career path, most people think that you always need to show progress, a job title or money in every step. And actually, if you know where you want to be, sometimes a sideways or even a backward step can actually get you closer to your long-term goal. For instance, going to work on a brand you truly love, it may require a step backwards, or getting into an industry that you've always wanted to work on may require a sideways step. So don't be afraid of that. Maybe earlier on in your career, and go back to, don't worry if you don't know what you want to do, just try your best, surround yourself with good people, and the rest will take care of itself.
Channel your inner teenage boy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that resonates with me. I think I'd probably been working for a lawyer for about 6 or 7 years before I decided I actually wanted to be a lawyer. So, which I've arrived at a decision now, which is
reassuring to hear. Thank you.
So you've decided.
Thank you ever so much, Giles. Just to wrap up, one of my favourite bits of these podcasts is always to ask a few more light-hearted, quickfire questions. So I'll pick a few of these.
I always find these ones more difficult than the challenges. Okay,
so what's your favourite thing about what you do?
I'd say that's probably an easy one. I'd say it's the people. So I'd say one thing we've managed to do is it's not just an amazing brand, but we get to work with everyone who we work with is fully behind the philosophy, fully lined up. I have an amazing team. I love, the rest of the Bowers team and the engineers.
Even when they frustrate you.
The partners that we work with. So yeah, I definitely say that's what makes it easier every day going in there and, feeling like you're part of something.
Good answer. On theme, what's your favourite James Bond film and why?
Oh, that's a good one. I'd have to say, if I had to pick one, and I'd hate to pick one, but I'd probably have to go with Goldfinger.
Okay.
Going back to all the things coming together in terms of the story, the actor, the kind of magic, I'd say it was all there. But I have to say, shameful to admit that when they first cast Daniel Craig, I was one of the doubters, but I'd say, Skyfall, Casino Royale was brilliant, but Skyfall, that again, I felt like that all coming together. They really hit their stride. Great cast, great script, great actor. So, but yeah, I could watch any of them, to be honest.
Yeah, it's an iconic series.
Even the Timothy Dalton ones.
We won't cut that out. We'll keep that in. Advice you'd give to your 20-year-old self and also your 65-year-old self. So looking back and predicting the future at the same time.
The advice I'd give my 20-year-old self, what if I could go back, would be buy Apple stock and buy Bitcoin at the right time. Apple stock was $1, I think, at one point.
Yeah.
My 60-year-old self was spend more time with the family and less time at work.
Again, good advice, particularly the Apple stock. And finally, who would play you in a film about your life?
I mean, look, I could give you a serious answer here, but I'm going to give you one of my heroes, and I'm going to say Will Ferrell. I'm not saying my life is a comedy, but I think I'd like to watch that movie.
Watch his interpretation.
Yeah, I think exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. So thank you, Giles. Thank you for spending so much time and sharing great insights. What we really heard today was the importance of having a true North Star when it comes to brand, the 3 R's, and the importance of making sure that it's not just about reach, but the resonance and the alignment is massively important with what you try to do. And that idea of being a custodian, which I think increasingly in a world where short-term planning is becoming increasingly prevalent, whether it's politics through to business decisions, the idea of actually thinking longer term was a real pleasure to hear, and actually how you bring the great heritage of Bowers and Wilkins in line with the current market and the ambitions was really inspiring to hear. So thank you for sharing those thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rich, for joining. And it was great to see the two of you having worked together, sharing some stories together. So I appreciate that as well. And thank you, last of all, to all of you for listening or watching. You can download other copies of Client Conversations from the Charles Russell Speechlys website or from wherever you listen to your podcasts. So thank you all. Until next time, we'll speak to you soon.